Welcome to Sports Insider here on cleveland.com. I'm your host, Chris Fedor, flying solo today. My partner, Dan Lobby, is not here. He's on his way to Cincinnati. The Browns have a huge game against the Bengals tonight in Cincinnati. Mary Kay Cabot, our Browns beat reporter, will join us in about 10 minutes to discuss that. Paul Hoynes, our Indians beat reporter, will join us in about 20 minutes to talk about Corey Kluber's chance for the Cy Young, Terry Francona getting a new contract extension. But it's going to be a big weekend in college football as well. And joining us to talk about the showdown between Michigan State and Ohio State, one-third of the Ohio State reporting team, he is Doug Lesmerises. What's going on, Doug?
Hey, Chris, I thought it was nice of the Browns to clear out for the weekend and let Ohio State have the whole stage.
It was nice talking to you, Doug. We'll talk again on Sunday. How about that?
Yeah, no, it's a big, this is it. You wait when you play in the Big Ten, you don't have many big games, so you really seriously wait all season for a game like this.
Does Ohio State understand the magnitude of it?
Yeah, because they lost. This is, again, they were 24-0. Remember, they were 24-0 to start the Urban Meyer tenure here, and Michigan State ended the hopes of the national title game last year. Michigan State knocked out the Ohio State program back in a big way. They called into question everything that had happened the previous 2 years. How good was Ohio State really if they couldn't beat good teams? Ohio State went on and lost their bowl game. Now they lost to Virginia Tech. Michigan State went on and won the Rose Bowl. Everything is trending up for Michigan State since that game last year, trending down for Ohio State, and this is Ohio State's chance to get it back.
And do you feel like Ohio State's approaching the game like that, Urban Meyer's approaching the game like that, where he's going to leave it all out there on the field in East Lansing?
Yeah, it's some of the guys have tried to say, last year doesn't matter, but most of them have said, we circled this on the calendar, we're trying to win this for the seniors last year. They know what the deal is, and they know they had to get better on defense. All the past defense issues we've talked about all year and how they changed everything. That showed up in the Michigan State game and the big plays they gave up. That helped trigger the change here. So there's just a lot of things. There is no doubt, and there's no sort of trying to evade the idea that this is huge. This is it. This will basically be the determining factor of whether you judge this season as a success or not for Ohio State, is whether they win this game. Because if they win this and then something else happens down the road, at least you have this big win. If they lose here, you're still asking the questions, can they win a big game?
Doug, so many people do bring up last year's game against Michigan State in the Big Ten championship game. You've brought it up. The players have brought it up. When you look at Ohio State this year, is this year's Ohio State team better than the one that lost last year?
Boy. Urban Meyer said last night he thinks Michigan State is better. I don't think that Ohio State is better. The offensive line is not as good. They don't have Carlos Hyde. We've debated sort of the quarterbacks all year. J.T. Barrett and Braxton Miller are very different. But in a game like this with a great defensive coordinator like Pat Narduzzi, Braxton Miller's more unpredictable, maybe harder to game plan for. We don't know for sure how J.T. Barrett's going to play in a big game. There were holes in the secondary last year in scheme and personnel. Those have been patched. But other than that, I still think last year's team is better for Ohio State.
So when you look at this year's Ohio State team and you compare it to Michigan State, where do you think the Spartans are going to try and attack Ohio State?
It's interesting. It's the Michigan State offense that I think you really have to worry about. Michigan State's defense is maybe a notch below what it was a year ago. But Michigan State is scoring. Connor Cook is a very confident quarterback right now. Last year going into that game, he was much more of an unknown quantity. They still have a pretty good running game. They've developed a number one receiver in Tony Lippett that has made some big plays down the field. So Ohio State, I think, has to contain Cook, has to make Cook feel uncomfortable. Virginia Tech's quarterback beat Ohio State because the Buckeyes got pressure but couldn't get him down, and then he made plays on the run. They have to get after Connor Cook and get him down. Otherwise, I think Connor Cook will get out on the move, make some throws. He'll hang in the pocket, make some throws. And if he gets on a roll and starts feeling good, that'll be a problem for Ohio State.
Doug, earlier this week, one of the Michigan State players said J.T. Barrett is a better quarterback than Braxton Miller. You buy that?
It's one of those things that's like sometimes, you know this, Chris, the word quarterback can be used in a lot of different ways.
Sure.
Like, are you just describing he's a better quarterback? Or are you saying he's a better quarterback in terms of Peyton Manning's a quarterback who makes all those kind of throws, but then, you have a guy who's a dynamic athlete playing the position who maybe isn't as much of a quarterback but is a good player. So I still think Braxton Miller's really good, and I still need to see for sure what J.T. Barrett can do in a game against good defense. Now, Braxton Miller, for instance, did not throw the ball very well at all. He completed eight completions against Michigan State last year, but his running ability in that game helped keep Ohio State alive. So can J.T. Barrett, if Michigan State takes away the throw game and makes it hard, can J.T. Barrett run enough? Can he do enough other things running the offense to keep Ohio State in the game? I mean, I'm still going to lean Braxton Miller at this point, but, maybe J.T. Barrett could change my mind Saturday night.
The way that I've always phrased it, Doug, I've always been under the impression that Braxton Miller is not a true quarterback, but that's okay because in college football, sometimes it's about just having great players at specific positions. So if I were to answer my own question, Doug, I would say that I think Braxton Miller's the better player, but J.T. Barrett's probably the better quarterback. Is that fair?
I mean, I think that's the discussion. I think that is the way you have that discussion. Now, the thing is, the way the offense is running this year, this is what they said Braxton Miller was going to do this year. He was going to distribute. He wasn't going to be relied upon to be a one-man show as much. Maybe Braxton Miller will be doing exactly what J.T. Barrett is doing. But, comparing them as young players, J.T. Barrett is more comfortable, more secure as a thrower standing in there running the show than Braxton Miller was as a young quarterback. But, yeah, I think that's the ultimate thing. I think the question in the end is, Chris, if you had a choice right now, you could say to Urban Meyer, okay, wave your magic wand. You have healthy Braxton Miller. You have healthy J.T. Barrett for this game right now. Who do you pick? Who do you want?
How do you answer that?
I'd pick Braxton Miller. I would pick Braxton Miller.
How do you think Urban would answer that?
I think he might take Braxton Miller, too, because I think Braxton Miller, again, we're comparing the senior Braxton Miller versus young J.T. Barrett. I think there's a chance Braxton Miller could do some or much of what J.T. Barrett has done running the offense, but against a good defensive coordinator and a good defense, he would give you the threat of the unknown in a game like this, breaking the big play that can maybe help win a game like this.
Doug, coming into the game, so many people are going to focus on J.T. Barrett. The last time he played a somewhat talented defense against Virginia Tech, he had the worst game of his young career so far. But aside from J.T. Barrett, give me an X factor in this game, a guy that maybe not enough people are focusing on, but's going to have a huge impact on the outcome of the game.
I'll say Jalen Marshall, redshirt freshman H-back. He shares the position with Dontre Wilson, but Jalen's been getting more time lately. I think they have to get him involved in a variety of ways. They have to throw him the ball. They have to hand him the ball on jet sweeps. They have been using him in the Wildcat, was taking direct snaps at quarterback. He's a high school quarterback. He threw it once last week against Illinois. I would not be surprised if there is more of a wrinkle in there this week for him to throw out of that Wildcat formation looking for a big play. He's also become their number one punt returner. He's taken some crazy risks back there. If he's not careful with the ball, a turnover like that could change the game, but he also is a threat to break it every time he touches the ball. So he has come a long way. He is a five-star dynamic talent playing for the first time this year who's figuring it out, and he's the kind of game who could change a kind of player who could change a game like this.
Doug, I don't think it's a bias or anything like that, but it seems like this new college football playoff committee is not a fan of the Big Ten. If Ohio State goes on to win this game against Michigan State, how far did they move up?
I don't know if they move up that far. I mean, the problem right now is that, you have Michigan State at 8. So I think, you could have said, well, maybe Ohio State would just take Michigan State's spot, But right now, 6 and 7 are playing each other this week, TCU and Kansas State, and 9 and 10 are playing each other this week, Notre Dame and Arizona State. So the winners of those games, I think, are both going to be in better shape than the winner of Ohio State-Michigan State. So the bottom line to me is what the committee is telling us so far is that the Big Ten is last among the Power 5 conferences. In terms of, they don't judge it by conference, but in terms of the schedule, strength, and opportunity for big wins that conference provides to its best team. TCU and Kansas State are both ahead of Michigan State. teams from the Pac-12, from the ACC, from the SEC. They're ahead of the best Big Ten teams. So that means the Big Ten is not in control of its own destiny. The Big Ten, I think, is only going to get in if the other conference champs lose, and that's not a good spot for the Big Ten to be in.
Doug, my friend, I appreciate the time today. Thanks, bud.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
There he is, Doug Lesmerises, one-third of our Ohio State reporting team. They are going to be in East Lansing. Big-time showdown. Ohio State, Michigan State, a rematch from the Big Ten championship last year, a game that a lot of people have had circled for a long, long time. That would be the signature win that Ohio State needs to at least catch the attention of the College Football Playoff Committee. Don't know how far they're going to move up. Don't know if it's going to be enough to beat Michigan State, but at least it's that one win on the resume that's going to help catch the attention of the College Football Playoff Committee. Coming up in about 10 minutes, we'll chat with Paul Hoynes, our Indians beat reporter. He'll talk about Terry Francona. He'll talk about Corey Kluber, all those kinds of things going on with the Indians. And also, Browns coming up as well. Big game. It's tonight. Browns and Bengals. Bengals playing for first place in the AFC North. And the Browns coming off 2 wins. Not necessarily that impressive in the last 2, but here they are. They're sitting at 5-3. It's November. It's a chance to beat the Cincinnati Bengals. And there's stepping stones for so many teams. The Cavs have them. The Indians have them. How many times when it comes to the Indians did we sit here and say, well, you know, we need them to beat the Detroit Tigers. We need them to beat the Kansas City Royals. We need them to beat those kinds of teams to show us something. Well, when it comes to the Browns, I feel like this is another stepping stone. It's the Cincinnati Bengals, so it's an AFC North rival. It's on the road, and it's an opportunity to get into first place. So it's one thing when you beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Oakland Raiders, you're going to take those wins. You're not going to give them back. You're going to look at the win-loss record, and you're going to look and see 5-3 and say, okay, great. But this is different. This is against Cincinnati. These are the kinds of games that the Browns have to win to show that they are going in the right direction. They are turning the corner. And Mary Kay Cabot, our Browns beat reporter, joining us now here on Sports Insider. Mary Kay, getting ready to go to Cincinnati. How are you?
I'm fine. How you guys doing?
Doing great. All right, Mary Kay. So the big showdown is tonight, Browns and Bengals. How are you feeling? How are the Browns feeling heading into this one against Cincinnati?
You know what? I think they're feeling very, very confident heading into this game. I think, especially the defense, I think they feel that they could match up pretty well against some of these guys. Even in talking to like a Dante Whitner, he observed that, hey, you know what? This offense goes as Andy Dalton goes, and if we can disrupt him and get him off of his mark, rattle him a little bit, then we should be good.
When it comes to the Browns, Mary Kay, the last 3 weeks they have struggled running the ball, and running the ball was a strength of the team at the beginning of the year. It opened up a lot of things for Brian Hoyer, opened up a lot of play action. Is it too simple to say that Alex Mack went down, he's the best center in the game, and that's where the Browns' running game fell apart? Is that too simple?
Well, it's just a little tiny bit too simple in that I think, in addition to that, I think teams caught up to the scheme and decided, you know what, we are going to put an extra guy in the box. We're going to go 8 in the box, sometimes even 9 in the box, and we're going to take away your running game. So it was a combination of the two things. Alex Mack being gone and teams saying, we're going to force you to prove it to us that you can beat us with your arm. So a combination. But in the first 5 games, they averaged 146.4, and I believe the last 3, something like 52, a little bit over 52.
So what's it going to take to get that running game going back in the right direction then, Mary Kay?
Well, they have to continue to commit to it, first of all. You can't abandon it. You can't go away from it. And then they just have to try to loosen up defenses by hitting big plays. A little harder to do when you don't have Jordan Cameron out there to stretch the defense, but they can do it with other guys. You know, they're hitting big plays to the Taylor Gabriels, and hopefully for them, Andrew Hawkins will be able to play today. But they have to keep getting those big chunk plays that make the defense say, hey, you know what? He can beat us with our arm, and we have to pay attention.
It's Thursday night. It's prime time. It's against the Bengals. It's a battle for first place in the AFC North. But if you just look at the opponent, Mary Kay, the Bengals compared to all the other teams that the Browns have played so far, would you say this is the Browns' toughest test, or do you think some other team has been the toughest test?
Well, you know what? When you look back over the first part of the season, at first we were thinking, you know what, hey, Pittsburgh is not all that. But now when you look at those Pittsburgh games, they look a little bit better in retrospect because obviously Pittsburgh has put it together and they look better. So I don't know if I can honestly say that I think the Bengals are the best team that the Browns have faced, but they certainly are the best team that they have faced since that Pittsburgh game. They've been, kind of eating up on the weaklings of the NFL a little bit. So, I do think that this is a tougher test for them. However, I think Cincinnati's pretty banged up. And I look at this team and I think, you know what? They're having some real issues. The Jaguars almost beat them last week. Andy Dalton threw 2 interceptions. He's thrown 5 in his last 4 games. So when you look at that, you look at Leon Hall being out. You look at Gio Bernard being out. Andre Smith, their right tackle. You've got Ray Maluga, Vontae Burfict out for this game. They're very, very backed up. So I think that neutralizes it a little bit.
Mary Kay, you mentioned the Browns dealing with a few injuries of their own. Andrew Hawkins, a game-time decision. Jordan Cameron not going to play. If Jordan Cameron continues to miss some time, how can they fill that void in the short term?
Well, they only have a couple of games, of course, until Josh Gordon gets back, and I think they've done a good job of filling the void with the Jim Drays and the Gary Barnages. Those guys keep coming up with big plays, and they can also block. So, and then they're finding, Brian has no qualms whatsoever about throwing to guys like Taylor Gabriel, who are the more no-name type of guys. And look at Miles Austin. I mean, every time I look up, I feel like Miles Austin these days is catching another pass for a first down. So I think he's really started to come into his own.
Mary Kay, there was a lot of conversation this week about Ray Farmer, the general manager of the Browns, held a press conference, said a lot of things, talked about the future of Brian Hoyer, talked about the team overall, where they stack up in the AFC North, how much ground they've made up. When it comes to Brian Hoyer in particular, were the comments that Farmer made a surprise to you?
You know what, maybe a mild surprise just based on the timing. I think right now heading into the biggest game of Brian's career and one of the biggest games in recent Browns history, you just don't necessarily expect the GM to be sort of questioning the future of your current starting quarterback. So perhaps the timing was a little bit odd, so I was surprised from that standpoint. I think basically what he's trying to say is, look, let's play out the rest of the season, and that could determine how this thing unfolds. If Brian takes them to the playoffs and he continues to play well and looks really good when Josh Gordon comes back, I think that does mean something, and I think that they would have to take a good, long look at that. Is
that the scenario, Mary Kay, for Brian Hoyer to be the quarterback of the Browns next year? He makes the playoffs. Is that the only scenario?
Sure, that would be the quickest and easiest way to say to the team, you know what, you can't let me go, you can't let me walk. So that's the first thing that he's got to do. And then they do have to make a determination. Do they really feel that they can turn the team over to Johnny? Because Brian Hoyer wants to start. Now, perhaps there's a chance that he would give the team the hometown benefit of the doubt. He wants to stay here, he bets on himself, and he feels he can beat out Johnny. But unless he gets starter money and they make a long-term starting commitment to him, he's going to look around and see what else he can get.
Mary Kay, for tonight's game against the Bengals, give me that matchup that you're going to watch that you think is going to have a big impact in determining the outcome.
Andy Dalton versus the secondary. Andy Dalton versus the Tayshaun Gibsons and perhaps even the Joe Hayden. That's exactly where I think this game will be won or lost. I think the Browns will get good pressure, especially with their right tackle being out. I see Paul Kruger coming off the edge, maybe Barkevius Mingo as well. Getting him off of his mark, forcing him into a couple of bad throws, and Tayshaun Gibson coming up with another pick.
I know you do this on Browns Insider on Wednesday nights, but I'm going to ask you a fill-in-the-blank, all right? You can answer a person, you can answer something a little bit more than just one person, but fill in the blank for me, Mary Kay. Blank is the biggest reason the Browns are 5-3 this year.
You know what? Let me say Brian Hoyer for that, because even though he's had his struggles, when it comes time to closing out the game after the defense or the special team has gotten him the ball in the last couple of weeks, he still has had to go and score a touchdown to win the game, and he's been able to do that. Without that, they are not 5-3, and he had them in it in the beginning, so I'm going Brian Hoyer.
All right, Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter. Thanks so much for joining me. Enjoy the game tonight, Mary Kay.
Thank you.
All right, check out all of our Browns coverage. We'll have so much leading up until the big showdown between the Browns and the Bengals tonight. Kickoff just around 8:30. And check out all of our Browns coverage, cleveland.com/Browns. Also, if you have any questions, any comments, as Sports Insider continues here on cleveland.com, go to the comments section of the bottom of the post, and you can leave those there. Joining us right now to talk some Tribe as we switch gears, he is our Indians beat reporter, Paul Hoynes. What's going on, Hoynesy?
Hi, guys.
All right, so some news here with the Indians. They get a new contract extension for Terry Francona. Hoynesy, when you think about Francona here with this team in particular, why do you think he's such a great fit here?
Well, I think he has an instant credibility. He's done the job. He's won, and he's won World Series. And he didn't do it 20 years ago. He did it, 2004, 2007. So I think that carries well in the locker room with players. Also, I think he has brought a pretty good, just a good vibe with him. You don't see that tension in the locker room. They've won for 2 years, so the tension isn't going to be there. But in the long season like baseball, there's always problems arise, and you haven't seen too much that surface. He's very good with people, and he's good in games. He really runs the bullpen well, and that's probably the biggest part of the team from 2014.
Hoynesy, there was a big managerial change around Major League Baseball. Joe Maddon no longer with the Tampa Bay Rays. He goes to the Chicago Cubs. Do you think that kind of prompted this new contract extension for Terry Francona? Or do you think this is something that the Indians and Francona just wanted to get done no matter what?
This has been in the works for at least through August. So I don't think Maddon, changing jobs there changed anything. And Francona still has 2 years left on his old contract, plus an option year on the old deal. So he was going to be here for a long time, no matter what.
All right. So now that Terry Francona locked up for another 2 years, an extra 2 years, what does this mean for the Indians' approach this offseason? Chris Antonetti has talked about it. Mark Shapiro has talked about it. Terry Francona has talked about it. How aggressive do you expect this organization to be?
I don't think they're going to be real aggressive. I think if they do make a big move, it'll probably be through a trade. If you look at their roster up and down, from the first 25 guys through the 40-man roster, they've got a lot of young guys locked up. They've got some immovable veteran guys. So I think it would really take a trade to open some spots to make a significant change on this team. And from talking to the Indians, they think they're in a pretty good spot with their young guys, Gomes and Brantley and Kipnis and Santana. They like the emerging rotation. They've been able to produce a good, solid bullpen for the last 2 or 3 years. So I would think unless they make a trade, they're probably going to work around the edges as usual in free agency. I don't see a big free agent coming this way.
So if they don't make that big trade, Hoynesy, can they still be a surprise team next year? Maybe a team like the Kansas City Royals, a team that kind of came out of nowhere this past year, or is that not in the possibility here?
Well, my problem with it is I think if they stay status quo, they're counting on Kipnis, Swisher, and Bourne bouncing back from subpar offensive years. Maybe David Murphy in that group as well. And I don't think you can just sit there on your hands and do that. Mm-hmm. I think you have to be aggressive. I think you have to try to improve those at the club where you can, because you can't count on all four of those guys all of a sudden coming back to their and regaining their form. I think, I think this is a good team. I think it's a solid team, but I think it needs more, and they're going to need more offense. You can't score 3 or fewer runs in half your games and expect to win.
Corey Kluber up for the Cy Young. How much of a chance do you give him?
I think he's got a real good chance. I think it's definitely a 2-horse race. Chris Sale, had a great year, but he missed a month with an elbow injury. So it's Kluber, Hernandez, and Sale are the 3 guys. I think Kluber and Hernandez are the 2 guys that are, that's where the winner's going to come from. I think Kluber's got a chance. I really do, a good chance. I think he finished stronger than Hernandez, won his last 5 games, struck out 39 guys in those 5 starts, his last 3 starts, I should say. Yeah. When the Indians were still in the hunt, Hernandez was it was spottier than that. Hernandez won it in 2010. It still grates me. He only won 13 games when he won it in 2010. Is this guy going to win his second Cy Young with 15 wins compared to an 18 and Kluber's 18-9 record? I know that's old school thinking, but I think Kluber has a great chance.
Well, Hoynes, a lot of the people that vote on this thing. Is that something that they look at? Do they look at a guy's past stats when winning one award and compare him to his opportunity to win a next award? Is that what they do?
I don't think so. That's just me grinding an old saw there, probably. But there are a lot more younger writers in the BBWA now that vote for these awards. They are sabermetric guys. They've expanded the horizon of how awards are interpreted and the value of a player is interpreted. So you really don't know. The old school numbers, strikeouts, wins, that kind of thing don't carry as much weight as they used to.
Hoynes, you know how this conversation goes. When the Indians have a Cy Young Award winner, people start freaking out. Oh boy, they traded one in Cliff Lee. They traded another in CC Sabathia. Already getting the questions here about the future of Corey Kluber. How long is he locked up for, and is this guy going to be a big, big, big part of the Indians' rotation moving forward?
Well, I think so. When you look back and when Lee won it in 2008 and CC in 2007, they were rubbing right up against free agency. Right. They were in multi-year deals, but they were knocking, they were a year or 2 years away from free agency. They were as good as gone because the Indians weren't going to be able to afford them. Kluber's in a much, much different situation. He's only got 2 years in the big leagues, 2 years plus some change. He's not even eligible for arbitration this year. So you've got this guy, regardless of what you do, for at least 4 more years, whether you try to, sign him to an extension or not. So, I think it's a totally different situation than Lee and CC.
Speaking of pitching, do you think there's any chance that the Indians kick the tires on Justin Masterson this offseason, or do you feel like that ship has sailed?
I think that ship has sailed. I really do. I mean, you always hear the lip service. Oh yeah, as soon as the guy's going out the door, we'd love to have him back. We'll talk to him again. But that, I've rarely seen that happen in Cleveland. Maybe Kenny Lofton, back 10, 15 years ago. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think, Justin, that ship has sailed, as you said.
All right, when it comes down to it, there's one more award, a biggie to hand out. The Gold Gloves have been handed out, still trying to figure out who that Cy Young is going to be. AL MVP is another one. Mike Trout, Victor Martinez, Michael Brantley, number 1. Are you surprised that Brantley is a finalist, and how much of a chance does he have?
I really think the award is going to go to Trout.
Okay.
He's finished second to, Miggy the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. I think it's probably his turn. And ironically, this is probably the worst year out of his first 3 years in the big leagues, and he'll probably win the MVP. I think Brantley, had a great year. I'm kind of surprised he finished in the top 3. He's one of the 3 finalists. You look at Nelson Cruz's year. what he did. 40 bombs, 108, RBIs for Baltimore, kind of a reclamation project. I mean, so Brantley finishing ahead of him was a shock. And, Victor just had a great year, career year. But, I think probably the award goes to Trout because he's a center fielder. He plays both ways. Victor probably just right now he's a DH at this time of his career. But Brantley, I think you're just seeing probably the voters just saw, they studied the numbers. It's not just batting average, home runs, and RBIs anymore. And this guy, Brantley, just had a great year across the board. 327, 45 doubles. He had a 890 OPS, 23 steals out of 24 attempts, 97 RBIs. I mean, he had a breakout year. And, and while it's a little surprising that he finished in the top three, it's well-deserved.
Hoynes, appreciate you joining me, bud. Thanks so much for the time.
Well, thanks. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
There he is, one of our Indians beat reporters for cleveland.com, Northeast Ohio Media Group. He is Paul Hoynes. Also, thanks to Mary Kay Cabot for joining us. Earlier, we had Doug Lesmerises. If you missed any of that, you can watch the archive a little bit later this afternoon. Thanks to all of you for joining us here today on Sports Insider. We do it every single Thursday right here on cleveland.com at 11:30. Browns and Bengals tonight. Thursday night football, big showdown, first place in the AFC North up for grabs. Continue to keep checking out cleveland.com/Browns as we've got continuing information going up all throughout the day, and we'll talk to you next week here on cleveland.com.